I was a gamer. That's the sentence that's going to start the telling of my experience. I would pretty much head to GameStop every Saturday to get a pile of brand new games. I didn't have much allowance, but when I heard a game was out, I would annoyingly call my brother David from his room to drive me to GameStop. He loved it, and secretly, the only reason why he kept bringing me back was because he was a gamer as well. Me and David went to the local GameStop so much, the employees were greeting us by our names. Some of them even slipped us free games over the years, which I loved. I was 10 at the time, so I wasn't into games like Grand Theft Auto, but David was. He was all about M-rated games. He knew trivia, information, everything about them. But the games I knew about were the same kid stuff. Super Mario Bros., Legend of Zelda, Little Big Planet, stuff like that. Me and David would often even do contests in the car driving back home about how much we knew about our newly bought games. Whoever lost had to eat something terrible, like raw eggs. Manly, but disgusting. One time, my brother lost one of our car contests, and he ate his own toenail clippings. I'm getting off track. So one Saturday morning, I called my brother to get a game. Kirby's Epic Yarn, I believe. He was quick to pick up, knowing the GameStop routine. We drove there, my brother listening to the radio like every normal car ride. We had the same interest in music, so whatever he put on was instantly recognized. Good old times. We got to GameStop, seeing familiar faces, and one unfamiliar face. A new employee wearing a wrinkled up and stained GameStop uniform. His brown hair was messy, and he was about 20 to 25 years old. He had some stubble and his name tag read Duncan. This man, Duncan, was bored and tired, despite the fact he was working in a gamer's paradise. We were about to buy Kirby's Epic Yarn, but Duncan stopped us. Duncan stared at us for a few moments, and looked left and right, giving us a Pokemon game. One of my favorite game series. I loved Pokemon. I knew almost all 151, and I had a Pokemon-themed blanket. Duncan stared me right in the eye, and said that this wasn't for me. It was for David. Apparently, Duncan knew David from high school. They shook hands and everything. Duncan gave him the game, and off we went. The funny thing is, I never got Kirby's Epic Yarn. Instead, I went home with absolutely nothing. We got home without doing our weekly car contests, and as soon as we got to the front door, he shut the door to his room and started up his old Game Boy. It was getting late, and I had to go to bed. I tucked myself into bed, and had quite the dream, being a blue Charizard. I woke up, brushed my teeth, and went down for a nice waffle breakfast. However, something was odd. My brother wasn't at the table. I asked where he was, and Mum said he's being bothered by something. Since I was an idiotic kid, I didn't think about the game at all. My brother eventually came down, and sat down without saying a word. We ate, and all that time, his eyes were focused on the food, almost unblinking. When we were done eating, he just went back to his room, and I heard the door lock. Being a Sunday, I didn't have to go to school, so I spent most of that day watching cartoons and playing Pokemon games on my own. I also went on some gaming forum, and discussed that my brother got a free game. I was a bit jealous, but not to the point where I would steal his game. I heard a scream from my brother's room. Curiosity got the best of me, and I went to his room. Due to a small hole in the door, I looked inside and saw my brother sitting on his bed, hands buried in his face. Not literally, of course. His hands were just covering his face. I asked him if he was alright, and he just stayed silent. After a few moments, he looked at me and put his finger through the hole in the door. His finger slowly pointed down, and when I looked down, there was the cartridge, its label facing the floor. I gasped and scooped it up in my hands like a baby, not even looking at it. I put the cartridge into an old Game Boy Advance my dad had given me, and started the game. I was expecting to see what had my brother so worried. I almost looked away when it loaded. But to my surprise, everything was normal. Besides the name of the game. That was Pokemon Extinguished. Frickin' Pokemon Extinguished. I believed at this time, that's what got my brother so down. He'd got a bootleg game from an old friend he had good times with. The title screen had a bright animation, and a Charizard was flying across the screen in its pixelated glory. The animation was an orange logo with flames on top of it. These flames looked like they were drawn in Microsoft Paint, but I didn't care. Maybe laziness on the animator's part. Suddenly, the screen flashed a bright blue, and the logo was black. Charred almost. The logo was extinguished. I saw its cleverness, extinguishing the logo when the game was named Pokemon Extinguished, but I noticed one small detail other than the extinguished logo. The Charizard was slowly falling down, like a plane losing control. Its tail flame was missing as well. The Charizard abruptly fell down and landed with a roar. As soon as it fell, the game screen turned to black and the game begun. Note that there was no start button or anything like that on the title screen. Not even a continue button. The game started off with a professor named Professor Chair. He was a female professor, and just like the flames, was seemingly drawn in MS Paint. Although it was noticeable, it seemed like a good drawing, and actually looked like it could be in a real game. Greetings, young one, and welcome to the world of Pokemon, an amazing place where we're at one with the creatures of this world called Pokemon. I typed my name Howard, chose my gender, and continued. The transition from the gender screen to my digital room was with a light blue splash of water. I was sleeping in my bed, unlike other Pokemon games. My snoring continued for about a minute, before my character finally woke up. The television was on, and it was displaying the news with a text box on the bottom saying what the news was. Breaking news. Town set on fire by Charizard. Tragedies occur. 5 injured, 20 deaths, only 1 house spared. It seemed odd to me at first, but I just ignored it and continued downstairs. I was never greeted by my mum. The second I stepped outside, I gasped. The buildings were black. Or charred, rather. It was like a burnt down ghost town, except for the laboratory. I met with Professor Chair. She was upbeat and happy, despite the fact that the entire town got burnt. She was more than happy to give me my Pokemon. To fit in with the extinguished theme of the game, I picked Squirtle. You know, to extinguish flames. I stepped outside and went to the first route. Grass was all charred, so there were no wild Pokemon. Well, alive wild Pokemon. I saw some charred Rattata and a few Caterpie on the ground. One of them was even still burning. I was getting a little creeped out now. I arrived at my first town. It was called Punyap Town. This town was burnt down to the ground, not even close to charred. There were no buildings, but there were some pet Pokemon such as Lillipup and Houndoom that lay charred. I even saw some villagers charred laying on the ground, unmoving. There was a woman who was slowly dying on the ground. There was a gurgling noise from her, presumably from the woman's charred and messed up throat. The noise stopped like a sound clip being cut off though, and the woman then lay there, dead. I was getting creeped out now, so I went and asked my brother exactly what was going on. He was busy doing something. I tried looking at the hole in the door, but it was blocked by a piece of paper. I was smarter than just to walk away, so I got a pair of scissors and ripped the paper a little through the hole. I could look through now, but all I could see was my brother cutting off the flame part of his Charizard plushie. Huh. I went back and continued playing my game. I looked at the screen, but I was in a different town. Orangine Town was the name. I walked around and there were charred buildings. In fact, it was the same charred buildings for every town I went to. Rosebush Town, Red Yellow Town, Mary Town, and even Furry Chew Town. It's like the creator of this thing wasn't even trying. I continued to explore until I found a waterfall at the end of Cheery Town. I went up to it and without any text box or anything like that, I slipped and fell down the waterfall. There was a cutscene with my character falling down the waterfall, hitting my fragile body parts on rocks and crap. A cry came from the speakers, and a Charizard was headed for the route ahead. The cutscene was over, and I was in the route with a few cuts on my sprite. I saw the charred route, the grass still on fire. My character moved slower, as if in pain. I made sure to avoid the flaming grass, unsure of what would happen if I touched one of the patches. A battle started, and my carp sprite was versus a level 100 Charizard. I couldn't press any buttons except the attacks. I tried using hit, but it wasn't very effective. It didn't lower the Charizard's health at all. I tried kick, and it lowered its health by a few pixels. The Charizard started attacking after I did all 4 moves on the dragon. Its move was nameless, but it tried to burn me. It missed, but that wasn't really the attack. It was like a smoke bomb. The Charizard was actually flying through the flames to charge right into me, and it worked. I was sent flying backwards, but after a few seconds, I limped over to the battle screen, and I can now select a Pokemon, and I selected Squirtle. I used Tackle. It did absolutely nothing. The Charizard attacked my Squirtle with a body slam, crushing the poor thing's shell. I had 4 moves which had no effect on the Charizard. I thought for a moment looking at the attacks. That's when I noticed something. To the left of the attack screen was a tiny, barely noticeable box. I selected it, and it grew in size, replacing one of the other moves. Squirtle learned Water Gun. I used the move and the game took its precious time to use it. After a minute, it finally happened, and water was launched at the Charizard without any warning. I noticed that the water stream wasn't directed towards the Charizard's body. It was directed towards its tail. It's super effective. The Charizard did a little animation. It was walking around, dizzy, on its last moments of life. But the last thing it did before falling to the floor was hitting my Squirtle with its extinguished tail. Squirtle fell to the ground, unmoving. Both of them had unique replacements for the fainted. Squirtle lost, and the game took its precious time again to display the final error message, the final thing the game would ever display to my horrified eyes. Charizard was extinguished. The Game Boy Advance turned off after that. I tried to turn it on again, but I couldn't. I removed the cartridge and it still wouldn't turn on. I looked at the Game Boy Advance and finally realized the game had broken it. I sighed, still scared and half expecting the Charizard to fly into my room and burn me alive. I opened the door shaking with the cartridge in my hand. I put the cartridge in my brother's door hole, and it fell to the ground like a coin being out of a slot machine. My brother slowly opened the door, and with wet eyes he hugged me tight. I hugged back, still shaken by the game. David took the cartridge, holding my hand and dragging me along. We went to the front door, and we threw the Hellspawn out, seeing it as absolute garbage. We even thought of suing GameStop, but we decided not to. My brother let go of my hand and walked back inside like nothing had ever happened. I was visually still scarred, wondering why he was walking away like nothing ever happened. I remember staring into the garbage can for a few seconds, just to make sure Charizard wouldn't fly out and kill me. I was an idiot. A few weeks later, almost forgetting about the incident, we drove to the local GameStop again to see what they had in store. I bought a classic, Pokemon Fire Red, and after I saw a cartridge with its label on the floor, below the other classics, we drove home, doing a car contest. I started up the game excited. My brother looked back at me playing the game while he was also walking up the stairs, and after eyeing the game for a little while, I kept walking up the stairs. I was so excited to finally play a new, real Pokemon game again. I started the game up, holding my device close to my face. I think Mum left the oven on. Thanks for sticking around to the end. And if you enjoyed today's story, make sure to leave a like. And if you want more like it, make sure to subscribe and ring the bell so you never miss a story. If you need more now, why not check out my Pokepasta playlist? I'll leave that on this card, and I'll catch you in the next story.